Coming up on the Lead Security Podcast with Preston Hocker.
There's nothing physical about developing your situational awareness. It's completely mental, kind of like the game of chess. Chess, as well as situational awareness, requires focus, interest, and critical thinking. When people think about situational awareness, they probably think about a guy sitting in a restaurant with his back to the wall, facing the door so he can see all of the people who are coming and going. It's like that one scene in Bourne Identity where Jason Bourne spouts off all the license plates for every car in the parking lot. Then he makes a guess as to which car is most likely to have a gun in the glove box. He lists off a bunch of other random information that he seemingly pulled out of thin air. In some cases, when people set out to become harder targets, they get their priorities all backwards. They buy a gun, they get their concealed weapons permit where that's necessary, and then they dump a truckload of money into self-defense and firearms training. Now, none of those things are innately wrong. On the contrary, they're actually really good to do. However, all of those are reactionary methods. In today's episode of the Lead Church Security Podcast, we're talking all about situational awareness. Now, before we jump into the conversation any further, do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe to this channel wherever you're listening or watching this. I'd also love to know some specific demographics of my audience. YouTube can tell me a general age, sex, and even where you're from, but I'd really love to know the backgrounds of the people who are consuming this content. If you would, please let me know in the comments wherever you are consuming this content. Let me know what draws you to these videos. Like, are you a pastor? Are you a church volunteer? Maybe you work in kids ministry or youth ministry or both, and you're just looking for tips on how to keep the kids that you are responsible for safer. Whatever the case, let me know so I can better tailor this content to you, my audience. In Patrick Van Horn's book, The Left of Bang, bang indicates some kind of traumatic event. Like, think about an act of violence, or even think about an avoidable medical emergency, like a child who gets this massive gash on their foot because there was exposed metal in the field where the kids often play right after church. And nobody paid attention to the field. Nobody walked it to make sure everything was safe. Completely avoidable. If bang refers to a violent incident or a medical emergency, our goal should be to focus all of our energy, all of our resources on staying left of bang, or in other words, being proactive. Once the incident or once the bang occurs, we're in complete reactionary mode, which is a lot more chaotic and contains a lot more questions. Situational awareness allows you to spot danger before it ever materializes. It also gives you a head start in reacting to the incident before it ever occurs. There's nothing physical about developing your situational awareness. It's completely mental, kind of like the game of chess. Chess, as well as situational awareness, requires focus, interest, and critical thinking. We're going to dive deeper into those topics in upcoming videos, but for now, we're going to stay on topic and focus strictly on situational awareness. Lots of people look at their lives as a chessboard. Now, at the beginning of a game of chess, everything is nice. Everything is neat. It's all set up in an orderly fashion. All of the pieces are placed exactly where they're supposed to be. At the beginning of the chess match, the only threat is on the opposite side of the chessboard. But as soon as one person moves even one piece, everything becomes considerably more complicated. After both players make just one move, there are roughly 400 possible interchanges. After the second pair of moves, there are roughly 200,000 move combinations available. Then after the third pair of moves, there are well over 1 million combinations of moves that are available. You know, most summers, my family likes to take a family trip to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. While we're there, it's not uncommon to watch my nephew and my brother-in-law dive into a game of chess. Now, I've never been one for chess. I guess I just never sat down long enough to learn how to play. I never had anybody really teach me the intricacies of chess. But it is interesting to watch because, as I just laid out, with all of the possible combinations and all of the moves that are available, even within the first few minutes of play, it's obvious every game is likely to be different. You hardly ever play two games exactly the same. At least that's true if you're a novice like myself. Now, to someone who's never played chess much, it feels overwhelming, even chaotic. But imagine being a master, not just good, but like actually a master at chess, and being able to map out all of your moves in advance in such a way that you know exactly what your path to victory is going to be. That is situational awareness. It's being able to fully comprehend the situation before any moves are made, making constant assessments and predictions based on pre-event indicators that you were recognizing. Why? Because you were paying attention. Your eyes were up. You were looking around. You're not lost in the rabbit hole that is social media. Now, before we close out this episode, I want to give you 5 distractions you're going to find at your church. 5 things that are going to work to steal your attention when you should be most attentive. Now, the first item on this list is mobile devices, like we just mentioned. This one isn't new or surprising to anyone. While mobile devices might be an incredible tool in our digital age, they also can be massive distractions that blind us from pre-event indicators that we should see without much training or focus. If mobile devices are becoming a problem within your team, it might work well if you have a code word or code words or code phrase that you can use to tell your team to pay attention. Instead of telling your volunteer security team members to get off the phone, maybe you can just ask them, what are you watching the game today? Or like, are you going to go out for dinner, or are you going out for lunch? Where are you going for lunch after church? These are things that are going to be a bit nicer to ask your team, rather than, especially like in a crowded area where a lot of people are hanging around. It's going to be better for you to ask them these simple questions and tell them in code to pay attention or to get off the phone, rather than just saying it straightforward where everybody is going to know that he just got in trouble. The second item on this list is simple boredom. Boredom sets in when you're forced to do monotonous tasks or maintain less active access points. Our minds tend to wander and we tend to daydream if we're not doing something that is keeping our attention. If you want to fight boredom on your team, have your team members manage different job descriptions throughout the month. That means don't have the same person do the same job every single Sunday. Now, the third item on this list is physical fatigue. Most of the people on your team probably work 40 or more hours a week. On top of that, they've got a spouse. They may be parents or even grandparents. I've got some really killer grandfathers on my security team. Although situational awareness isn't typically a physical activity, it can be absolutely draining. And when you're already drained from your previous week with work and kids and your spouse, man, sometimes it's really hard to give when you have nothing left to give. If you notice somebody on your team is facing physical fatigue or is tired, just exhausted, offer to get them a cup of coffee. If their fatigue is at a level that can't be remedied with coffee or with caffeine, switch them to a roving position, which means they're going around the property looking for things. Sometimes a roving position gets their bodies moving and makes them become more aware. If they're just too tired, they can't do the roving because they just can't even walk. If they're just too tired, be willing to operate with a more skeleton crew. Offer to let them go sit down, enjoy service, or even go home. Your volunteer is going to appreciate you noticing their condition and your sensitivity to their condition to allow them to take a leave for their own goodness and safety. The fourth item on this list is emotional drain. Emotional drain is different from physical fatigue in that sometimes things that happen to us in life wear us down. Emotional drain doesn't require you to burn any calories. You can be emotionally drained while sitting on your couch. Emotional drain can happen from a struggle in a marriage or difficulties at work. Emotional drain isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We're all susceptible to being emotionally drained. This is why it's so important for you as a leader to communicate encouragement and purpose to your teams. If your team members view your security team as a source of encouragement, even when life is emotionally draining at home, they can feel a sense of refreshing or a refreshment when they're serving on your team. Now, the last source of distraction might be a bit of a surprise, but it's probably the most difficult one to deflect, at least for me. The last item on this list is going to be friends. The problem with church security and situational awareness is churches are supposed to operate as if they're families. We call each other brother and sister, but when we're supposed to be operating from a place of awareness, a friend who's wanting to talk about their week or tell you about how their team is going to win the World Series this year, it all becomes a distraction extremely quickly. See, not everyone is going to understand your role in security and the responsibility you and your team has for paying attention and assessing threats and constantly having all of these moving parts going on in your brain. We have to respond to friends, but we have to respond to them with sensitivity. So you train your people to respond to this kind of interaction or this kind of distraction by saying something like, I'm really interested in what you had to say, but I need you to tell me about your week later. Can I call you this afternoon so we can talk? Right now, I'm in the middle of security, and for the safety of our church, I've got to pay attention. And I'm either going to pay attention to what's going on with the church and security, or I'm going to pay attention to your story. And I need to be able to do both. Can I call you later? Or when can I call you later today? Situational awareness is all about identifying pre-event indicators so you can assess threats and respond to them accordingly. If we have active shooter drills, but we don't understand the basics of being situationally aware, we're going to fail miserably. Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. Before you go, make sure you give us a like and smash the subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our valuable content. On the next episode, I'm bringing my best friend, my brother, my business partner back on the show. We're going to draw a parallel between church security and one of our clients that we recently did some consultation work regarding a violent spouse. So it's going to be a good story. There's going to be some really good lessons in there. We're looking forward to it. We will catch you on the next episode of the Lead Church Security Podcast.